This video is going to tell you the best and worst supers in the game and why, ranked by some of the best pro players in Brawl Stars. Let's do it. Now, before we get into the rankings, I want to quickly go over the criteria we use to make the rankings so they make sense. First of all, no star powers at all were considered in this ranking because not all star powers affect super. So we wanted to make this as fair as possible. This will heavily affect some brawlers like, say, Jessie, and not as much others. One important factor in determining the rankings was how useful that super was across all game modes. Some supers are a little bit more specific to the game mode or the map for how useful and how often you're going to get high use out of those supers. For example, a stationary super like a turret might not have as much use in a game mode where you're going to be moving up and down the map a lot, or if it's a very wide map like a showdown map can be. Of course, stuff like the overall damage and utility that super can provide is going to matter a lot, but also the overall, what I like to call fear factor the super can provide is also important. For example, if the enemy has their super, how scared are you of them now with that super or without it? Also, we're not taking into consideration how fast you can charge each super. We're mostly just looking at the average use of a one-time super. And of course, here are the pro players that helped make this ranking video. If you want to follow any of these guys, links to do so down below. All right, here we go into the ranking. Now, I'll explain to the best of my ability, but I do only have like 20 to 30 seconds max per brawler, or else the video is too long, so let's go. The worst super in the game at 33 is gonna be M's super. First of all, the range on this is really not that long, and it's kind of awkward, because as M's, you want brawlers to be a specific distance away to do the maximum amount of damage with her main attack, and that tends to be at the very edge of the range of the super, and sometimes they end up going in and out of it a little bit, and it's kind of awkward. But overall, the range is not much, and the damage is very small. The slow is okay, but it's not a huge impact on a game. 38, second worst super in the game is going to be 8-bits, and overall it's a solid turret, but it is a stationary turret, and the range on the turret is so small, it's hard for it to be really useful. Of course, he has a star power specifically to overcome that weakness, but no star powers in this ranking, so 8-bits turret is overall not a lot of use. 31 is going to be BB super. This can be a not bad super. It's not a lot of damage. The range can be long. You might have a couple situations where you have really good bounces and you get a lot of damage. Usually it's kind of lucky considering how long the bounce is, and most of us aren't this good at like pool, I guess kind of is a similar comparison. It can provide high damage, but usually it's one shot, sometimes two. At 30, it might be a surprise to some people, especially newer players, but it's gonna be Jessie. Without Jessie's first star power, this turret just does not stay up long enough to really get that much use. Any good team will take out a Jessie turret incredibly quickly without Jessie having her first star power. On top of that, if you're at medium range away from this turret, it's really easy to dodge most of the shots of this turret. So not only is it easy to take out, but it doesn't provide much damage usually. At 29 is Piper super. This is definitely a not bad super, but it doesn't always provide a lot of value in a match. Piper is a long range brawler, so she's not really gonna be purposely pushing forward up the map to get a really good super. It's really just an escape from an enemy coming to you. So if that happens, it's a good super and it will provide some damage, and it can break down walls in occasions, but it's not really the main part that you want to use it for. At 28 is Bo. Now this is another one that a lot of people might have their own opinion on, but if you are a good player, it's not that hard to trip bow mines without even thinking about it that often. You can get pretty used to tripping majority of the bow mines. Maybe you'll mess up sometimes, it will definitely happen, but overall, you don't get a ton of value out of bow mines. If you're facing new players though, this can be a really good super because they just don't know how to handle it, but as they get better at the game, it gets a lot worse. Also, I want to mention that you can definitely have bad placements with bow mines since they are stationary objects and they're not always going to be in the best place or always get value. 28 is Colt. Now this super can provide a good amount of damage, but often it can be kind of hard to aim. It's not a very flexible shot. While it does have long range and can break walls, it's not always going to get that sort of value you really want. You will have sometimes where you're lucky enough to hit multiple enemies they just happen to stay in a line for you, but most of the time that doesn't happen too often. At 26 is B. This can be a super that can definitely help B out, but overall the super itself is not that great. It's low damage, medium to long range kind of, although the slow is definitely not bad. That's really the main part that's useful about the super. That's kind of it. At 25 is Bull. Now this super can be amazing in a mode like Heist, but not quite nearly as good in other modes like Brawl Ball or in Solo Showdown, and primarily because, one, Bull takes damage while he supers. It's very obvious where he's going, so it's easy to hit him while he's doing it, and two, you can't choose exactly where you want to stop or land, unlike a lot of other brawlers who have a super where they can go a certain distance. So while in Heist, that's like totally fine, he can just super to the safe, no problem. In other modes like Brawl Ball or Solo Showdown, you probably don't want to go that full distance all the time to have the best possible place to land. At 24 is Mortis' super. Not a lot to say here. Overall, it's not a ton of damage. It does have nice lifesteal in the long range, so it's certainly solid, but it's not really any game-changing super. At 23 is Spike's super. Overall, it's got area damage, medium to long range, and pretty small damage with a decent slow. Although admittedly, enemies do tend to get out of it before it ends, it can still definitely be useful for Spike to hit more of his attacks or for your allies to hit more attacks while they're sitting in the super. At 22 is Daryl. Now this super is good because it auto charges. I know we're not talking about how fast you can charge a super for this video, but this is the one brawler I think you have to at least mention it. I'm not talking about how fast you can charge it without this auto charge, but just the fact that it has the auto charge is a very valuable part of this super. And being able to not engage with enemies can make it, at least usable almost everywhere. Although admittedly, the super itself does not have much range and it does barely any damage, so it's not a huge impact, but it's nice at auto charge. At 21 is Tick. This super is definitely not bad. I mean, it's a spawnable sort of that chases the closest enemy. Now, you can shoot down that spawnable so it doesn't do any damage, which is a big weakness on it. But it is pretty fast, and depending on the brawler you're using it on, they might not be able to deal with it well. Of course, their allies can cover for them, but it doesn't always happen, so it can provide decent value. At 20 is Rico's super. Now this one is higher than Colt's, mostly because it's a lot easier to hit multiple enemies or just enemies in general with this super since you can bounce it off walls. You have 2 angles or even more to potentially hit enemies and make that super valuable and do a lot of damage. At 19 is Poco. Now Poco's super can heal a lot overall if you're healing yourself and at least one other ally, potentially 6,000 health. But it doesn't always get that full value. If your ally only took 1,000 damage, but say you really need to heal, well, you will heal yourself up as much as you need, but that ally only gets 1,000. So while the max potential for a Poco heal can be really high, it's not always gonna have that. At 18 is Carl. This super has a lot of pretty good things about it. It's got really good speed, it's got decent damage, and it can hit multiple enemies, although admittedly the range on the spin is very small itself. But with the speed, you can sort of overcome that weakness, so it can be a pretty solid super. It's not going to be game-changing without the shield that Protective Pirouette provides, but it's still a valuable super. All right, at 17 is Barley's super. Barley's super is pretty easy to get at least decent value. Usually you can hit at least 1 or 2 enemies, sometimes 3, but always is going to be providing good area control or area denial. At 16 is Nita's super Bruce. Without her star powers, it's not quite as good, but it's still a pretty solid super. Either way, it's going to be chasing enemies, even though it's a little slow, and it will body block shots for you and push enemies back the map. It's not always going to get that much damage, but it can still provide value pushing them back and tanking for you. At 15 is Crow. Crow's super can actually be really good, but it doesn't exactly suit Crow, as it does a ton of damage and you want to be really aggressive with it, but Crow is also one of the lowest health brawlers in the game, so he's not always going to get that super high damage potential because it can also be really risky, but it can still be a really decent super poisoning enemies and with the potential to do a lot of damage. At 14 is Dynamite's super. This is a lot of really decent things going forward. It can hit multiple enemies, got decent range, it has knockback, and it can break down walls. It's not amazing damage, but that's why it has a star power to buff that up, but of course no star powers here. At 13 is Pam's healing turret. And now this one, I mean look, it's got unlimited healing, which makes it really strong potentially, but of course it's also a turret, so it doesn't move up and down the map with you, and really that's the main weakness with this and making it a little bit more mode and map dependent, but the turret itself is still really good. At 12 is Penny's cannon. Penny's cannon, one of the better turrets in the game, partly because of its long range, allows it to be a little bit less mode and map reliant. Even if the mode requires moving up and down a lot, it has the longest range in the game, so it can overcome that to a certain degree. It's not hitting all the shots because of how long it takes for the shot to land, but it's still really annoying to have to constantly dodge that cannon and the enemies as well. At 11 is El Primo. El Primo's super is definitely the best distance-oriented super. Not only is he invincible while he's mid-air, but he can choose exactly where he wants to land. It does a little bit of damage plus knockback as well, so he can have a really solid effect. But the fact that he can choose where he wants to land and is invincible while he uses it is really good. At 10 is Brock. Brock's super can be a little bit inconsistent, but once you get the hang of it, it does have really high potential. Not only can hit multiple enemies, do a ton of overall damage, but break down walls and overall put a lot of pressure on the enemy. If you have that Brock super, they're going to be paying attention for a little bit, and it allows Brock to attack over walls as well, which is another solid ability. At 9 is Shelly. Now, Shelly's super is by far the best super versus tanks. But of course, that's pretty much it, right? So this is where Shelly's super is one of the more mode and map reliant supers in the game. It is one of the best supers on any place where Shelly is probably good, but there's a lot of places where Shelly's super is not gonna get much value, like in a lot of bounty or any long range oriented place. At 8 is Leon's super. Now, invisibility, I mean, look, that's obviously gonna be a pretty strong super. Without that, Leon would be really garbage, and he's already not that great. But with it, it's definitely going to make Leon a lot more viable. While it doesn't last a long time, it's really important for Leon. At 7 is Max. People are quickly discovering, I didn't even mean to make that pun, how good Max's super can really be, especially combined with tanks. Oh my god, it can be crazy strong. And actually, a lot of my pros wanted me to put this even higher, probably top 3. But I think, especially if we're playing with randoms, this is a more accurate place to put it. Randoms might not be able to use it quite as well, but the potential on the super can be really game-changing in pretty much every 3v3 mode and even in other solo modes as well, just to stay alive. Number 6 is Sandy. This one's maybe a little self-explanatory, but it's a huge storm that provides invisibility to yourself and your teammates, and it lasts for a long time. That in itself is really good. I mean, it's gonna not only make the enemy waste shots, but allow you to get the jump on them and get an easy kill or easy damage. At 5 is Rosa. Rosa's shield is insanely strong, 70% damage reduction, and you can use it exactly when you want. Can be so good. It can help you stay alive in any fight, and while you're doing that, you're probably charging up your next super as well. You're not gonna get it all the way, but still a good chunk, and it can be really good. Not only tanking the robot in Siege or trying to score a goal in Brawl, there's a lot of different ways you can use Rosa's shield really well. Number 4 is Frank. Now this is one of the supers that has a high fear factor, and it is one of the best supers in the game by far, with a long range and an incredibly long stun, and it breaks down walls. But of course, there's also big weaknesses with this super. It's fairly easy to interrupt it. A Dara roll, Shelly super, Tara, Jean, you can keep on going. There's a lot of brawlers that can interrupt a Frank stun, or of course it has the long time for it to land, so you can also walk out of it to a degree. So while it has really high potential, one of the best supers in the game, it's not always going to be consistent at landing it. Number 3 is Mr. P. Oh my god, this is definitely the most annoying super in the game because of the infinitely spawning portals that just keep coming out. This one is really, I don't think I need to explain this too much, but I mean, the porters just keep respawning no matter what. I mean, if you place it anywhere that's not too offensive, you're just gonna have infinite porters, and it's incredibly annoying. But not only the infinite, they also scout out enemies who are hidden or in the bush. So if you're trying to find an enemy, it will tell you exactly where they are and tank for you and do a small amount of damage. Now in the top 2, these are arguably the deadliest supers in the game. Number 2 is Jean. This is by far one of the best supers for getting kills in any 3v3 mode. Jean can cause a game-changing moment. Getting that instant pull on an enemy, even through a wall, and while you're pulling them, you're dealing damage to them. It's an easy kill for you and your teammate, and it can just turn a situation around. Hitting a Jean pull usually should result in a kill, and it can be a game-changing moment. But the number 1 best super in the game, I think it has to be Tara. As far as fear factor and game-changing ability, Tara's super has it all. Not only can she completely pull and stun enemies, but she can pull multiple of them in, get multiple kills, and she's one of the only brawlers that can do that pretty reliably, and it can be a really big effect on any game. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out more great brawler rankings right over there to help you improve, that I'm sure you'll enjoy as well. That is going to be it for today's video, though. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you later.